So my name is Kevin Wingert, and I work for the Water Security Agency. I'm the regional manager in the Swift Current office. And I'm going to talk today just about how our agency and our entire agency, just beyond our regional office, work with government relations and community planning on official community plans, but also subdivision reviews and that type of thing. So first off, the Water Security Agency was created in 2012. And it was really to deliver the 25-year Saskatchewan Water Security Plan. And the idea was to bring all portions of government that deal with water into one agency. And so bringing all those responsibilities under our single agency. So some of the things that WSA is responsible for is the operation and management of water in the province, including provincial dams and water conveyance works. Protection of drinking water, and so this includes the regulation of municipal water as well as wastewater. Protection of source water quality, including aquatic habitat. Flow, water level, flood forecasting for the province. As well as water supply planning that includes allocating water, whether that's surface water or groundwater, as well as water conservation. So how those things tie into, I guess, this talk today, I basically went back and looked at the Statement of Provincial Interest through government relations and looked for all of the water-related aspects of those Statement of Provincial Interest to see where WSA would have input or be involved. And so there's three SPIs, 6.7, public safety, 612, shorelands and water bodies, and 613, source water protection. So starting with section 6.7, public safety. So here is the statement of provincial interest directly out of the regulation. So it's ensuring the safety and security of individuals, communities, and property from natural and human-induced threats. So to assist in meeting with that interest, there's also some other information, so I'll highlight a couple of them here. First is prohibiting the development of new buildings and additions to buildings in the floodway of the 1 in 500 year flood elevation. So I don't know, sorry I wasn't here at the start, so I'm not sure if some of this has been gone over already, so I apologize if it has. But just to explain here in Saskatchewan, the floodplain, the two-zone floodplain. So the floodplain is defined as the area prone to flooding, and that's the combined area of the flood fringe and the floodway. So the definition of the floodway is the 1 in 500, that's our standard here in Saskatchewan, and it's where it's projected or estimated to have a depth greater than 1 meter or a velocity greater than 1 meter per second. Flood fringe is also where water will be in a 1 in 500 year flood event, and where it's projected to have a depth less than a meter and a velocity less than 1 meter per second. So continuing on from those previous bullets, number 4 is that required flood proofing of new buildings or additions to buildings have to be at least to an elevation greater than half a meter above the 1 in 500 flood elevation. So it talks about flood proofing in there. I mean, pretty self-explanatory, but it's just something that's in the design that basically raises up the building or whatever we're looking at here that will reduce or eliminate the risk of flooding at that higher elevation. So here's just the national standards. Saskatchewan's at the top. So of course, as I mentioned, that we have a 1 in 500 year flood frequency is our standard in Saskatchewan. And you can see the other provinces and territories all a little bit different, and Saskatchewan is the highest standard at the 1 in 500 year level. They also define the floodway a little bit differently in some areas than the one I just explained with the floodplain and the floodway and the flood fringe. So the division or unit that looks after This part, I guess, within the Water Security Agency is our Hydrology Services Unit out of Moose Jaw. And so when they're doing the reviews, community planning or government relations would send it to them, and they would review it, and often communities are looking for technical assistance. And it's difficult, I guess. There's kind of a number there, approximate number of communities considering urban, rural, resort. So it's not possible often to give the technical background that communities would often like to see. They just aren't able to provide that. But further down, it kind of explains under the subdivision reviews, and I guess it goes for both, is whenever possible, they will provide, if they have that information, the 1 in 500 flood elevation for a community or a certain area. And if not, they will provide the 1 in 500 year flow, and then recommend that the proponent or municipality retain a consultant to help them do that analysis and do that study. So the second statement of provincial interest was shorelands and water bodies. So this is where the province has an interest in environmental stewardship and responsible development and access to provincial water bodies and shorelands. So some of the points underneath this statement is really considering the impact to development on water bodies, including aquatic life and habitat, and trying to minimize wherever possible or mitigate or avoid, if possible, those impacts. So the division within the Water Security Agency that looks after this portion is our Water Quality and Habitat Assessment Services out of Regina. So they are the ones who issue the aquatic, the AHAP, the Aquatic Habitat Protection Permits. And so the purpose of those, and probably most of you are familiar and had to go through that process, but the point of them, I guess, is to preserve and maintain the productive level that existed prior to development. So trying to ensure that the development isn't having those major impacts. And so that's the things that they're looking at are things such as controlling soil erosion, preventing discharge of chemicals and so on during the construction, as well as protecting the aquatic vegetation. Sure.
I'm looking at the wording there, to ensure aquatic habitat is preserved and maintained at a productive level. Productive level of what? Is that a fish-based productivity, or is that production of a certain amount of water for consumption? Or?
I'll read you what they told me, because I had to write it down here as well. So see if it makes sense to me as well. So it defines here productive capacity is a habitat characteristic that denotes the capacity of habitat to support not just individual populations, but all cohabitating species that reside in the habitat. That is the definition that I was. It's the interaction with all of them together, I guess, is what they're looking at.
So they've got baselines for that, and they just can't compare.
Yeah, I honestly can't say for sure. I do have a contact coming up who is kind of the person who looks after the AHAP process for us, so he would be one that probably could direct that question to.
I'll be sure to get that name.
Yep, you bet. So one of this slide was kind of put together by the supervisor in Regina to help me out and to help explain this to you, but often the things that they run across are problems, I guess, that they see. So it may seem like a simple one, but it may not always be the case, is that developers can't clear lots all the way down to the water. Now this might be talking more kind of in a resort setting, but anyways, the same would apply to any development, I guess. So an aquatic habitat is required if work is occurring in the bed, bank, or boundary. And so the boundary, from she defined to me, is the total riparian zone, or a minimum of 5 meters back from the bank. So that riparian zone is defined by the aquatic vegetation. And if that is a distance further back from the bank, you have to go at least that distance or the minimum would be 5 meters from the top of the bank, is how they define the boundary when they're talking about the bed, bank, and boundary, where you need an AHAP and where you don't. She said one, not mistake, but something that communities or municipalities often do is that they will put designate environmental reserves right next to the water, and between the water and the lot, I guess, looking at a resort type setting. And when that area is I don't know if zoned is the correct word, but made that environmental reserve, they cannot issue AHAPs in that ER area. And so if that is the intent of the developer, the community, then that's fine. But I guess what they've found is often they do that without realizing the restrictions it's putting on them or their ratepayers into the future. So all lot owners will need to apply for an AHAP, whether that work takes place during the development or after. And again, that goes back to their bed, bank, and boundary as to where that can and can't take place. Something that, sorry, it's a little low on the screen there, but the number of boat docks on a lake is or can be an RM responsibility. I was told that if a floating or temporary dock is being put in on a lake, that no provincial permit is required if it's temporary. But there are some RMs that do have their own bylaws that restrict where and the number of docks that can go in, so that could be something through the RM. However, permanent docks, if they're going in, would require an AHAP through WSA, and that would also include vegetation clearing or trails down to the dock if they're cutting through the boundary and the bank. So this map just shows the province, and it shows the AHAP and the different zones and boundaries that they have. So here in this area, I believe all would fall within the southwest zone, they call it. It's very similar to our regional office zones or regions, I guess. But in this case, the southwest extends a little further north. But for everyone, I guess, if we're talking south of the divide stuff, really we're all in the southwest zone, and John Solomon out of our Saskatoon office would be the primary contact for this area. So the third statement of provincial interest is dealing with protection of source water that provides safe drinking water. So here are the bullets from within the regulations. So it's to ensure that the water quality for human consumptive and hygienic use is not compromised. It's considering the effects of the development on the water quantity, as well as the supply of water for servicing the needs of the development. So the department that looks after this portion within the Water Security Agency is the Environmental and Municipal Management Services Division, and most of those staff they're in Regina. We do have environmental protection officers scattered throughout the province, but they're based out of Regina. And so they're ensuring the provincial drinking water and wastewater interests are being considered. So when they do a review from community planning, they're looking at the legislation that they're governed by, which is EMPA, Environmental Management and Protection Act, as well as the Waterworks and Sewage Works regulations. So those are the pieces of legislation and act that they're looking at. They're also reviewing, when they're looking at these documents, they are looking at the community's infrastructure that they have in place and the quality of their water and wastewater, as well as looking at any future development that it's sustainable. So it might not only be quantity, but also it could be water quality standards that sometimes come into the future that by 2018 there might be a new standard coming in. So they'll look at those things and have the communities as much as possible ensure they're going to meet those future standards. So as I mentioned at the start, I'm in the regional office in Swift Current. So we specifically don't have a statement of provincial interest that quite aligns quite as closely as the other ones I mentioned and the different units within WSA that look at them. But we still do review subdivision reviews and OCP reviews. And kind of from the regional perspective, the things that we're looking at, I guess, or would comment on, are more around the use, diversion, and storage of water. So things like, are there existing water right projects in that area or on that landscape? We would advise new owners, landowners, of the need that they would to transfer those existing water rights into their name. So we would work with the client on that directly, as well as within the new development, is there intent to alter the natural drainage patterns? So is the new development what's going on if you're diverting water where it wouldn't naturally go, or it's not going to the outlet through which it would naturally run, then you're going to require a drainage permit, and you would work with the regional office on that part of your development. So that's all I have, unless there's any questions. Yep.
Unless someone wants to pipe in. A little while ago in 2015, I attended a seminar or workshop called Drought Proofing the South.
Okay.
And there was a lot of talk there about how to use water and create stock ponds of water in ways that were ecologically sound or environmentally friendly, specifically with regard to species at risk. But there was some interesting conversations about to what degree water could be diverted into a stock pond or a dugout and released back eventually or not into that water source, and whether or not that would trigger various different needs for permits. And just now, I think I heard you say that if you divert water and or drain water to where it would not normally go, that requires a water use license.
Correct. I mean, if you're talking surface water, and say for example you're on a water run and putting in a dugout. As long as the dugout was under a certain size, so as long as it wasn't storing over 5 cubic decimeters of water, and sorry, I can't give you that in gallons or something crazy, but as long as it's a standard dugout, small dugout, and there's no embankment on the downstream end, so you aren't taking the material and damming it up, essentially creating a dam, not a dugout, that would not require an approval from our office. It may require an aquatic habitat protection permit, and that's where I guess I have to be careful because I'm always thinking of the regional perspective. But that wouldn't require a surface water, that wouldn't end up with a water right license to that person to use it for domestic purposes. Now, if they were creating a dam for industrial purposes or something else, or an irrigation pivot or something, then that would be a different type of use that would require a permit in that case. So it really, I guess, depends on the situation, and I guess you're best to contact our regional office there to, look specifically. We can usually, when someone calls in, we can bring up the satellite imagery in our office, kind of see where you're talking, and can hopefully guide you better from there. Sorry, I don't know if that answered your question or not, but okay.
Who regulates water quality?
Water quality?
Yes.
We do. The Water Security Agency does, but there are still aspects of water quality that do go under other agencies. Environment would have some water quality parts that they would regulate as well.
And I'll refer you to one case where it's an irrigation dam,
Mm-hmm.
and the province wouldn't say that they would be responsible for the quality, and yet they own all the water behind that bank. Who owns the water? Does the province own it or the federal government?
Province does.
The feds do.
The province, sorry.
The province.
Yeah, the province is responsible. It's vested in the crown of the province, and we manage it, the province as well, yeah.
How about domestic dams? Who owns that water?
domestic dam, water is still owned by the province. In a case of a domestic dam, if it were licensed, I guess properly, I guess when it was constructed, going way back, it would have had an approval to construct issued by the province for a client to construct the dam, and an approval to operate for the storage of the water, as well as a water right license would be issued for you to use that water. So that would all come through the province. I guess the water technically is still owned by the province. They're giving you a water right. They're giving you the right to use that water.
Yeah, even if you built it, for stop water in there,
Right,
you know, and it's like 2 acre feet or whatever.
right. If it's licensed properly, I guess the water technically is still owned by the Crown, and then through the licensing process, you would have a right to use the water for your domestic purpose. Yeah.
Is that source water, or is that ownership of water, surface water only, or is it aquifer water as well? Well, water that's drawn from a well, is that also considered provincial use?
My understanding would be yes, that all water, ground or surface is owned by the province.
All right.
Good. Thank you.